What if Elder Scrolls Oblivion was a Pokemon game? You might think, whoa, that's crazy, those are two completely different games. But they actually have a lot more in common than you might think. Both games take place in a region filled with unique cities, each with their own aesthetic. Both games have a team of bad guys trying to take over the world with fire. And most notably, both games have caves filled with annoying flying little shits in them. But going back to the city thing, each city in Oblivion has a chapel dedicated to a specific deity, much like how each city in Pokemon has a gym dedicated to a specific type of Pokemon. Coincidence? Yes. Also, each city in Oblivion is led by not a Jarl, what are they called in this game?
They're called counts or countesses, you idiot.
Yeah, that's right. And each city in Pokemon has a gym leader. I know the gym leaders aren't like the leader of the whole city, but they still usually hold some level of influence. And in case that hasn't got you convinced yet, how many cities are there with chapels of the divine? And how many number of badges are required to make it to the Elite Four? The numbers don't lie, people. So all this got me thinking, what if Oblivion was a Pokemon game? What if these chapels were replaced with Pokemon gyms? And what type would they be? So let's go on a journey through each city in Cyrodiil together, and who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two about the cities in this game. To make these decisions, we are going to look at which divine's chapel is represented in the city, things that the cities are known for, and just overall vibe and characteristics of the city. For example, let's start with the easiest one. Kasnach. I mean, it's fire, right? It has to be fire. Everything is on fire. You know what else was destroyed by fire? Cinnabar Island, the first fire-type gym in the entire Pokemon franchise. Kvatch has a chapel of Akatosh, who is usually represented as a dragon, so you could easily make an argument that Kvatch could be a dragon-type gym. But I have other plans for the dragon-type. Anvil. As a city with a name like Anvil, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that it should be a steel-type. But then you see that it's like the coastal city, so then you think water-type. Then you remember Olivine City, the city with the first steel-type gym, was also a coastal city, and it had a lighthouse, much like Anvil. Then you realize that Hulbury also had a lighthouse, and it was a water gym. And then you look at Anvil's coat of arms, and it looks like a bunch of spearheads. And I guess those are generally made of metal. But then you see that Anvil flaunts a giant mermaid statue, which is like a water-type fish lady, so then you have no idea what to conclude, so you just look around the city for any clues, and you notice that Anvil looks like Naboo, which I think is very watery, but then you find these wells, which don't even go anywhere, so now I don't trust these people at all, and the coup de grace is hearing this grown-ass man refer to another man as a scrote.
Well, except for that Newheim the Portly. He's a mean old scrote.
So at this point, I'm just going to slap a steel type label on this town and move on to the next one. Because at the end of the day, this place is called Anvil after all, so there's really no use in all this overthinking. Skingrad. This one is tricky because when you look at the flag, you think dark type. But I don't think it's that simple. I know Skingrad's count shares more than just a title with Dracula, and that seems pretty dark too. But Skingrad's chapel is for Julianos, the god of wisdom and logic. And that makes me think psychic type. And in terms of Pokemon types, that's as close as you could get to opposites. I didn't know what to do here, so I just asked the locals. And they all told me Skingrad is known for grapes and wine and stuff. And that I should venture outside the city walls. So that's what I did. And they all said the same thing. Wine, 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 wine. Alcohol. Something you typically drink at nighttime. And it lowers your wisdom and intelligence. Something the psychic types rely on. And psychic is weak to dark. So, dark type. Final answer. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. Apparently this place has a lot of things going for the Fighters Guild here. And Countess Valga describes her people as tough, independent, hardworking people, which seems pretty fighting type to me. Whenever you see Pokemon like working in Pokemon games, I feel like they're usually fighting types. So I'm inclined to say fighting types for this town and move on. Plus this town has the chapel of Stendar, and the command of Stendar says to protect the weak. But sometimes you gotta, punch some danger in the face to do that. Bruma. Ice? I mean, if there's snow on the ground in the Pokemon game, you just know there's going to be an ice gym around. The only exception to this is Sirchester, who either has Melanie, an Ice-type gym leader in Pokemon Shield, or Gordy, a Rock-type gym leader in Pokemon Sword, which coincidentally was the other type I was considering for Bruma, because Rock-type is so defensive, just like Bruma is. Cloud Ruler Temple would not have been built in those rocky mountains if it wasn't. Plus, the chapel in Bruma is for Talos, and his command is to be strong for war, and war can be pretty cold. The Russians taught that to the Germans in the 40s. Plus, Nords resist frost damage, and there's lots of Nords in Bruma. Chidenhall. I was convinced the Chidenhall was going to be Dark-type, because, you know, the Dark Brotherhood lives there. Or Ghost-type because of the Chapel of Arcade, because Arcade is usually associated with death. But then I started to actually read about Arcade, which is a big deal for me because reading makes me sleepy. And I learned that Arcade is also known as the Lord of the Wheel of Life, or Lord of Seasons, or the God of the Cycle of Death and Birth. So yeah, there's an argument to be made here that Chidenhall could be a Ghost-type gym because of that alone. But when you consider the amount of foliage in this town, even the amount in the castle, and then you see that the sigil is what I think is a bunch of thorny vines, and then you consider the command of Arcade, which is honor the earth, its creatures, and the spirits, living and dead. Guard and tend the bounties of the mortal world, and do not profane the spirits of the dead. Well, I guess that works really well for Ghost type too, but I was going to make an argument for Grass type. But I genuinely don't know anymore. Let me know in the comments if you think Chidenhall should be a Grass or a Ghost type. Or maybe some weird third type. Braville.
Greetings.
Bug? I don't know, that's just like my first impressions because I feel like this place must be absolutely crawling with mosquitoes. Braville Sigil is a deer, so that doesn't make any sense. There is something called a deer tick, but that doesn't really help. Braville is described as the poorest and dirtiest city, so I'm sorry, but that still makes me think bug type. There is a very strong argument to be made for water type since Braville sits on the Nibin Bay and is even known as the daughter of the Nibin, but I feel like a water type town would be more likely to embrace the water, when I feel like in Braville they're more tolerating it. Like the people here must always be complaining about why everything's damp, or trench foot is a serious problem here. They have a Chapel of Mara, which doesn't really help either argument. Maybe water, since Mara is sometimes associated with fertility and agriculture. But my gut is just saying nasty mosquito bug type. Sorry. Leowin. Normal. This place is boring. Their flag is a horse, another ungulate. How original could you get? The city's chapel is Zenithar, the god of business, which seems pretty boring to me. And this is all supported by the fact that one of the few normal gym trainers in the Pokemon franchise is Larry the businessman, the most relatable character in all of Nintendo. So yeah, all signs seem to be pointing to normal type for me. Yeah, it's surrounded by swamp, so you could make an argument this should be a poison type gym, but I'm not gonna. It's the only place in the game that mentions white bread. I don't know if they meant to spell it like that, but if normal type Pokemon were a food, the Imperial City. So far we've covered 8 cities for 8 gym badges. So now you need to make your way to become champion, whether it be the champion of the Pokemon League or the champion of Cyrodiil. And it only makes sense for this ultimate battle to take place in the Imperial City, home of the Emperor, you know, the one who wears the Amulet of Kings, the thing that could only be worn by someone with the blood of the Dragonborn, whose sigil is a dragon, and who even becomes a dragon himself. So he has to be a dragon type trainer. I know you don't battle the Emperor, but in a way you team up with him to defeat the boss of the enemy team that's trying to take over the world. It's not a perfect parallel, but I'm trying. So that brings our journey through Cyrodiil to an end. Here's the map with all the Pokemon types I've given each town. I'm sure you'll disagree with some of them, and that's what the comment section is for. So go ahead and let me know what you think. One difference I haven't mentioned between the two games yet is that Oblivion is intended to be played like a sandbox RPG, where you can progress whatever whenever you want. While in the Pokemon games, you are given a set path for your progression. Pokemon tried the whole open world thing with the Scarlet and Violet games, and we can talk about those games if we want, but I didn't mind them. But in Oblivion, you go to each city to earn their support for the final battle. Very similarly to going to each Pokemon city and earning their badge and support for the final battle. They're both journeys about being the best like no one ever was. And I think that's pretty cool. Thank you and take care.